For years, the private island owned by Jeffrey Epstein was surrounded by rumors. Very few people were ever allowed to visit, and even fewer people talked about what it was like to work there. The island itself sat in the Caribbean, surrounded by clear water and steep rocky cliffs. From a distance, it looked peaceful, almost beautiful, palm trees and white buildings, quiet beaches. But people who claimed to have worked on the island often described a very different feeling. They said that once the sun went down, the entire place felt strangely empty, almost abandoned, even when people were still there. Some former workers later shared stories online about unusual things they experienced during night shifts. Stories that sound difficult to explain. No one knows how many of these accounts are real. Some could easily be exaggerations. Some could be misunderstandings. But a few of them are unsettling enough that people still talk about them today. Tonight, I'm going to share 3 of the strangest stories connected to Epstein's island. Stories from people who say they were there. Late at night, when the island was supposed to be quiet, one man who claimed to have worked on the island said he was part of a small maintenance crew. His job involved repairing electrical systems in several buildings scattered across the property. Most of the work happened during the day, but occasionally something would break late at night, and when that happened, someone had to go fix it. One evening, he was asked to check a power issue in one of the guest houses near the far side of the island. The building sat near a small rocky path that led toward the water. It was one of the older buildings, and according to the schedule, it wasn't being used that week. Around midnight, he finished repairing the problem and began walking back toward the main area of the island. The path was narrow, palm trees on both sides. The only light came from a few small lamps along the walkway. Most of the buildings around him were dark. Everyone else had already gone to sleep. As he walked past the guest house entrance, something caught his attention. A small red light blinking slowly above the doorway. At first, he assumed it was part of a security camera, but something about it seemed strange. During the previous week, he had spent hours studying the electrical systems on the island, including the camera network. And he clearly remembered that this particular building didn't have a camera installed above the door. Still curious, he stepped closer to take a look. The red light continued blinking, slow, steady, like something was recording. He looked up at the wall, expecting to see a small camera mounted above the frame. But there was nothing there, just the red light, hovering in the exact place where a camera lens would normally be. He frowned and leaned back slightly, trying to see if maybe the camera was hidden somewhere else. But the wall was completely smooth, and no wires, no equipment, nothing. Just the blinking light. For a moment, he wondered if it was some kind of reflection, maybe from another building. But when he stepped to the side, the light stayed exactly where it was. Still blinking, still pointed directly toward the entrance. Then suddenly, the red light stopped. Not faded, not dimmed. It simply turned off instantly. The doorway was now completely dark. The man stood there for a few seconds, staring at the empty wall, trying to convince himself that he must have imagined it. The next morning, he mentioned the strange light to the head of maintenance. The man listened quietly and then told him something odd. That building had never had a camera installed above the door. Not recently, not in the past, and according to the security plans, there wasn't even wiring in that wall for a camera. Another story came from a boat captain who claimed he occasionally delivered supplies to the island. Food shipments, equipment, construction materials. The trips usually happened during the day. But one evening his schedule was delayed by bad weather. By the time he reached the island, it was already dark. The water around the dock was calm. The sky was almost completely black. Only a few lights were visible near the main buildings. He tied his boat to the dock and began unloading several crates. The entire island felt unusually quiet. No music, no voices, just the sound of waves hitting the wooden pier. After finishing the delivery, he began preparing to leave. He untied one rope, then another. But just as he stepped toward the engine controls, something caught his eye. Movement out on the water, and at first it looked like another boat approaching slowly from the darkness. He leaned over the railing to get a better look. The shape of the boat became clearer as it moved closer. And that's when he noticed something strange. The design looked identical to his own. Same length, same color, same metal railing along the sides. As it drifted closer to the dock, he felt a sudden chill run down his back, because he recognized the exact markings along the side of the hull. Scratches he remembered from years of use. A dent near the rear ladder. Even the small broken navigation light near the front. The approaching boat looked exactly like his. The only difference was there was no one on it. No captain, no passengers, and no lights. Just an empty boat moving silently through the dark water. The captain stood there staring at it, trying to understand what he was seeing. Then he slowly turned his head and looked back at the boat tied to the dock behind him. His boat, still right where he had left it. He looked back toward the water again. The second boat had stopped moving, floating about 20 feet away from the pier, perfectly still. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then slowly, almost gently, the empty boat turned. Not from a wave, not from the wind. It rotated smoothly as if someone had grabbed the wheel. And then it began drifting away from the island, back toward the darkness it had come from. The captain later said he left immediately after that, and he never accepted another delivery to the island again. One of the most recognizable buildings on Epstein's island was a strange blue and white structure that sat on top of a hill. Many people online referred to it simply as the Temple. Photographs of it circulated on the internet for years. No one seemed entirely sure what the building was used for. But according to a man who claimed to have worked briefly as a security guard there, the building was usually locked. Employees were told not to enter it, and it was rarely mentioned by management. One night during his shift, he was walking along a path near the center of the island. It was around 3 a.m., the quietest time of the night. Most of the island was completely dark. Only a few dim lights near the main house were still on. As he walked along the path, he happened to glance up toward the hill where the temple stood, and immediately something felt wrong. Light was coming from the windows, the warm yellow glow spilling out into the darkness. He stopped walking, because earlier that evening he had personally checked the building, locked the doors and turned off the lights, and confirmed that no one was inside. He stood there for a moment staring at the hill, trying to decide whether someone had returned unexpectedly. Finally, he started walking up the narrow path toward the building. The closer he got, the quieter everything felt. No insects, no wind, no movement in the trees, and just silence. When he reached the top of the hill, he saw that the door to the temple was slightly open, a thin line of light stretching across the ground. He pushed the door open a little further and looked inside. The room appeared almost empty, bare walls, stone floor, soft yellow lights glowing overhead. But in the center of the room there was a single wooden chair, facing the doorway, as if someone had placed it there to watch whoever entered. The guard stepped inside cautiously and looked around. There was no one there. No sound, no movement, just the chair and the lights. Then suddenly, without warning, every light inside the temple went out. The entire room dropped into darkness. For a split second, he couldn't see anything. Then he heard something behind him. The soft sound of the door moving. He turned quickly, but the doorway was still open, no one standing there. Nothing outside except the dark path leading back down the hill. The guard said he left the building immediately and never went back inside. The next morning, he reported what happened to management. But when maintenance inspected the building later that day, they discovered something strange. The electricity inside the temple had been disconnected weeks earlier. There was no power running to the lights at all, which meant the glow he had seen from the hill shouldn't have been possible. Places surrounded by secrecy tend to collect stories over time. Some are exaggerated, some are invented, and some come from people who truly believe they experienced something unusual. The island once owned by Jeffrey Epstein is one of those places, a location that continues to raise questions even years later. And while many of the rumors will probably never be confirmed, stories like these continue to appear online from people who claim they were there. People who say that once the island became quiet at night, something about the place felt wrong. And sometimes, when a place holds enough secrets, even the silence can start to feel unsettling.